What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
What's up, Fantasy Points? This is Outside the Box, week 13. I'm here as usual with my very handsome co-host, who is also very mustachioed today. This is a look I have not yet seen out of Scott Barrett. Scott, of course, is Master of Dank Stats, I believe is the title that I gave him. Just a great NFL stats guy. Love to be here with him. Scott, have you done this look before? Is this a new one for you?
Yeah, I am pulling out all the stops this week for multiple reasons. One, you have kicked my ass the last 2 weeks now. Your Galbrain plays, your off the wall plays have been killer. Mine, not as good. And so there's that. It's also, this is the week I've been looking forward to for months. This is historically one of my most profitable weeks. Maybe the most profitable week. It's the Sunday after Thanksgiving. Why is that? It's because all the other sites, all the other analysts, they're spending time with their family. They're getting drunk. They're eating delicious food. Not me. Thursday, I am grinding. Wednesday, grinding. Friday, grinding. Today, grinding the main slate. Jake did a great job, crushed the Thanksgiving slate the whole time. I'm focused on the main slate. And so I always crush this week. Again, other analysts, busy, preoccupied, traveling, basketball games, whatever. And so this is my time to shine. I'm going to up my, let's say I typically spend $500 per slate. I'm going to be like $1,500 this week. And Mustache Scott is also historically far more profitable than regular Scott, bearded Scott, unmustachioed Scott. So pulling out all the stops, I think we're going to absolutely crush it this week. I love this slate. I feel really good about a lot of my conviction calls. I will just say it's a little bit more of an MME slate, just because unlike the past few weeks, there's so many players to like, similarly priced players with slate breaking upside at similarly stupidly low ownership, but still a great slate. I'm going to be very heavy on this slate. I think we're going to do really well. I am excited to chop it up with you and go over the slate.
I'm glad to hear that you have. I'm curious if we are on some of the same angles, if you're going to bring some new things to my attention. Before we get into it, I do have to note the Christmas tree in your background. I know you caught some flack for the Christmas tree. I don't know the size of the Christmas tree. People are not a fan. I feel like it looks a little bit bigger. Maybe you played with the angles to make it look bigger. Guys know how to do that. It looks like it's a little bit taller than it was during cashing points. And now you have something on the couch now. What is that?
I got flowers for my wife, and the flowers over there. And then this was like the filler, but she just put it in a pot. Yeah. I don't know. There's a lot of foliage. Hopefully a good luck Christmas shrub. Yeah.
Shrub. Love to see it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are going to go position by position as usual. Quarterbacks, running backs. We're going to take a brief intermission after running backs. I'm going to make a lineup, I think, at that point without Scott while Scott takes his intermission. And then we will continue on wide receivers, tight ends, and then we will build some lineups together. I think is probably how the flow of this show is going to go. I'm looking forward to it. I'm glad that you have strong convictions on this. I have some things that I really like, but a lot of stuff is still kind of, I can't decide what angle to play. So looking forward to breaking this one down with you.
Oh, really important. And something for maybe folks at home to do during the intermission, or do it right now, is we have a stupid cheap Black Friday sale. If you want access to everything the site has to offer, it's only $40. If you want to have access to Fantasy Points Premium, which includes all of my DFS stuff, betting, Discord access, that is only $10. And so, yeah, I know you're thinking, oh, well, the season's almost over. I don't know. We have this week, Sunday mornings are crucial in Discord. And then we have 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and then about 4 more playoff DFS slates. So only $10, stupid cheap. We went this cheap because we figured you'd try us out and you'd be like, oh my God, these guys are the best, and you'll stick around next year. So fantasypoints.com, check that out.
I think you're probably correct about that. Once you get a taste of the data suite, how do you go back from that? Yeah, I mean, you last week I tried to sell people on the data suite, and you were like, no, don't do it. Wait until Black Friday. So now is the time. Now is the time Scott told you to wait for time to sign up for fantasy points. All right, let's get into it with quarterbacks. And of course, we'll sort by ownership. Don't know what happened there. I'm going to refresh here. We'll sort by ownership for the quarterbacks, and we'll try to poke holes in some of the chalkier quarterbacks. All right.
And yeah, it's a little bug we're working through. Click on ownership first and then do position. That usually fixes it.
Gotcha.
I know.
I blame Jake. Definitely Jake's fault.
It's Jake's fault.
Justin Herbert, the chalk at quarterback. We haven't seen a ton of chalk at quarterback so far this year. I think this might be the first time all year we've seen a quarterback coming in over 20%, or at least not more than a handful. Herbert coming in 21% at 5,600 against Atlanta. How are we feeling about it?
I mean, it's rightfully the chalk. Justin Herbert is for sure your cash game quarterback of the week. You can read the slate breakdown. I did this solo without Jake Tribby. He got to enjoy some time with his family because he crushed Thanksgiving and made us a lot of money. This is all me. It's really long and wordy. It's not typically this wordy. It's like the Mark Twain thing where, I would have wrote a shorter letter, but I didn't have enough time. But so, yeah, I'll try and keep my, whatever I'm saying on this show short. If you want the more information and detail, $10, read the article. But yeah, clearly the cash quarterback play. Atlanta is just getting destroyed by quarterbacks in recent weeks, like terrible quarterbacks. Herbert's on a tear. He is running more. The team is passing more. There's no J.K. Dobbins, et cetera, et cetera. For tournaments, I'm totally fine getting off of him. 21% is crazy high for a player who hasn't really shown much upside, and there's other quarterbacks within that price range I like. One note I'll say, if you are going to play him for tournaments, Ryan Heath in advanced matchups made a really compelling argument against Ladd McConkey, where it's this sort of reverse slot funnel. It's an antithetical schematic matchup and to what typically suits him. But Will Dissly is popping for that reason. And Josh Palmer was top 5 in XFP last week, although he's terrible. And Quentin Johnston, has had these spike weeks. So I think it's a little interesting to experiment with a Herbert stack sans McConkey. But personally, I'm probably just not going to have any exposure due to this 21% ownership percentage. And probably not a lot of exposure to McConkey either outside of FanDuel, where he's stupidly mispriced. Like easy cash play on FanDuel, McConkey, Herbert, easy cash play on DraftKings. But for tournaments, I think it's a lot thinner, and 21% is pretty prohibitive.
Yeah. Agreed. Quite a bit of ownership for a large field tournament. Anthony Richardson is just $100 cheaper. You knock off $700 from the price tag. I know we talked about it last week that he's been there have been some more designed runs for Anthony Richardson recently. Did that hold last week? Or are we still seeing the same kind of trend? And how are we feeling about 14% going to Anthony Richardson?
Yeah, that held. I think he's averaging like 33% more design runs per game these last 2 weeks than Jalen Hurts, who leads the league by that stat across the full season. He had his career best performance through the air 2 weeks ago, career best rushing performance last week. Wasn't that productive, but this is just sort of who he is. Throughout his career, in his top 50% of games, averages 23 plus fantasy points per game, bottom 50%, 8.7 fantasy. So just super boomer bust, but still profiles as an elite value, like right there behind Justin Herbert by point per dollar. So you have that ceiling, you have that upside at a cheap price. Ownership is there. Matchups really good. Patriots are getting shredded the last 2 weeks. The coach is lambasting them for not being able to tackle. They have a ton of key starters on the injury report listed as questionable. They are down Josh Downs. Alec Pierce is banged up. I think one of their offensive linemen is out, but just a really strong tournament play, wanting to lean into that upside. Adonai Mitchell, who we'll get to, is also a conviction play of mine. And so I think that's fine. 14% is probably not good, but I've built some really good lineups with Richardson plus Mitchell plus maybe Henry, and then just like kind of stacked everywhere else. And I love it. But that's really kind of the argument for him.
Would you agree with me that you would not want to play Richardson in a large field GPP without a stacking partner, like completely without anybody? Just because he's getting enough ownership. I think a good portion of that will be just naked Richardson, like people throwing their cash game lineups into a GPP, that type of thing. So I think like once you just add a pass catcher, whether it be Pittman or Adonai Mitchell, like the combinatorial ownership comes down quite a bit, I think. And obviously you have the strong correlation. So that's probably my stand would be I wouldn't play Richardson naked. Although we've seen naked quarterbacks, much worse naked quarterbacks win slates this year. I don't know. How do you feel about naked Anthony Richardson in large?
I would say Adonai Mitchell's a must. That is a really strong conviction play for me. Everyone else is playing David Moore. I want to be playing the Ass God. We'll talk about it a little bit more later, but
okay.
I feel really strongly about that. And so I would have Mitchell 3,800, 3,900 on 100% of my teams that have Richardson. I might come under 14%. I don't know, but I really like that upside.
Okay. Joe Burrow coming in at 8% ownership. Man, I thought this week was going to be for like the Bengals across the board. Like it was just going to be, you can't really play him against Pittsburgh. They all project really well though, and really well point per dollar. Joe Burrow getting 8% ownership at 7,000. How are we feeling about it?
Yeah, I feel really good. So he was like 4% when I checked this yesterday. So I guess Darren moved him up. He's catching some steam. But like much better GPP play than Herbert Richardson. He's hit 30 DraftKings fantasy points in 3 straight games. He's averaging like 350 yards, 4 touchdowns per game. He's also like awesome to stack for tournaments because this offense is so heavily condensed between Jamar Chase and T Higgins. They've had a combined 55% target share over their last 4 games. And so obviously the stack has massive slate breaking potential. Higgins is our top point per dollar wide receiver value. So the values there. Chase has unrivaled slate breaking potential. And so, yeah, the matchup's tough, but Burrow can still get there on raw volume. He's thrown 50 plus passes in back-to-back games. This also might be the best schematic matchup he gets all year. Jamar Chase gets all year. He works his leverage off of a chalky Chase Brown. So yeah, really like Joe Burrow this week.
Sam Darnold also getting 8% ownership, as is Matthew Stafford. They are separated by $100. So we can play do you have a preference between Sam Darnold and Matthew Stafford? Do you like either of them?
Yeah, I don't really like Sam Darnold that much. Arizona since week 7 is far and away the best defense against quarterbacks by fantasy points per dropback allowed. I can certainly see how he hits. To me, it's just he's your cash play on FanDuel, and I think he's a little thin compared to some other names on DraftKings. So probably not going to have too much exposure to him. It seems like he's a little overowned relative to a Joe Burrow, who I love. And then Matthew Stafford, where the argument is very similar to that of Joe Burrow. I think in my highest dollar, smaller field teams, I'm going to be going with a Stafford double stack. You don't have to do that. But I like that personally. It's again, the same thing with Burrow, where it's not only is it a great offense, but it's such a highly condensed offense. So since Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp have returned to the lineup, Stafford leads all quarterbacks in yards, ranks second in passing touchdowns, 20.5 fantasy points per game. Saints getting hammered by quarterbacks, slot wide receivers, outside wide receivers since losing Marshawn Lattimore. And again, how condensed is this offense? Puka Nacua leads all players at all positions and targets per route run. Cooper Kupp ranks second. They both rank top 5 in XFP per game. They're combining for about a 66% first read target share. They're both projecting as top 5 point per dollar wide receiver values for us this week. I've taken down tournaments with a Matthew Stafford double stack before, and I like it again this week.
You're not going to lean back into your boy Demarcus Robinson, though. That's not the double stack you want.
I don't think, dude. Just a 66% first read target share is insane. Both players ranking top 2 in targets per route run. But I mean, hey, he's done it a few times where he's just the one who gets multiple touchdowns.
Have we ever seen 2 wide receivers from the same team end a season averaging more than 10 targets per game? Because I think we probably will with the Rams, right?
I think the Buccaneers did it twice.
Okay.
Once with Brady, once with Winston, but it is rare. It is super rare. But it's what you have with these passing offenses is like these power law passing offenses where it's like being the wide receiver 2 on one of these elite teams is sometimes being better than a wide receiver 1 on a middling team, not even just a bad team.
Yeah, definitely. Ollie said, my take this week is go to Puka and Cooper plus Stafford. Thanks for validating that. So later, thanks for validating that. Yep, on the same thing. The Goose, I don't know if you saw this, Scott, said, between your slate breakdown and Heath's matchups, I'm feeling great about this slate. Must reads every week. Yeah, 100%. Gotta read Scott and Heath's stuff. A lot of great stuff at Fantasy Points to get you ready for the slate. Continuing on, I mean, so now we're kind of past the chalky. Now we're down to 6% Jaden Daniels, 5% Geno Smith. I think that at this point, probably I should just open it up to you. Do you have specific quarterbacks that you want to bring up, or would you rather play the game of me asking you about guys?
Yeah, I'll touch on these two who weren't like at the top of my list, but are in play for sure. Probably pretty good plays. Jaden Daniels, if you throw out the one game he left early, the other game he suffered a open wound to his throwing hand that had to get super glued closed. He's right up there with the top quarterbacks by fantasy points per game, fantasy points per drop back. And then he had that stretch where he was dealing with the rib injury, wasn't running as much, but 74 rushing yards last week makes me feel good about that. The Titans are, vulnerable to quarterbacks on the ground this year, second most schedule adjusted rushing to quarterbacks. And then with these running back injuries, maybe he's forced to play hero ball a bit more. Maybe his rushing touchdown upside climbs a little bit. I do like Geno a little bit more at the reduced price. So we know he can get there just on raw volume alone. The Seahawks lead the league in passing yards per game. JSN is on a heater. The matchup was really interesting for me. I spent quite a bit of time with it. Maybe didn't really come up with a great conclusion, but they're giving up the most schedule adjusted fantasy points per game to quarterbacks over the last 5 weeks, despite the second lowest PROE allowed, far and away the top fantasy points per dropback allowed since week 7. So people are treating this like it's still some great defense, but the numbers are just not bearing that out. Granted, a number of these quarterbacks were hyper mobile, and maybe that's not Geno. But in any case, I think he's in play. I think he's a good play. But we'll talk about a few of my favorites in a little bit. I'll let you guess though. Okay. Who from among the sub 5% are my favorites? There's really 2.
All right. I'll guess those. I had not realized how bad the Jets were against quarterbacks. It is, as you see here, in terms of schedule adjusted, way, way bad against rushing quarterbacks, but also kind of middling against passing quarterbacks. Kind of interesting looking at that.
Yeah, and look at who they faced too. It's Kyler had his best game of the season. Anthony Richardson had his best game of his career. Russell Wilson had his best game of the season. Drake May had 12 fantasy points in just one full quarter. It's been bad.
Yeah. All right. So 2 that you're super interested in, and I have more that I want to talk about, but I'm going to guess for you, Baker again, 4% ownership.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah, it's Baker.
Against Carolina.
Baker Mayfield every freaking week. I do not know why he's not 14%. Although, again, same thing for Joe Burrow, Matthew Stafford, and the next quarterback we'll hit on. But they have the second highest implied point total this slate, just half a point behind Baltimore. Mayfield is just 0.5 DraftKings fantasy points per game away from being the QB2 of the slate. He's 1,100 less than the salary QB2. He's only 200 more than CJ Stroud, who's averaging 15.4 fantasy points per game. He has the most ceiling games of any quarterback this season, 5 with 27 or more DraftKings fantasy points. He's done this with Mike Evans not clearing a 60% snap share in any of Mayfield's last 5 games. And now he gets Evans back. Dude, he looked awesome last week. He was on pace for 460 passing yards before they really shut things down at halftime. Carolina is a bottom 3 matchup all season, last 5 weeks. People have said time and time again, oh yeah, well, like what if they're not pushed? Doesn't seem to matter against Carolina. It's really just quarterbacks going ham and running backs getting there as well often enough. He's leveraged on Bucky Irvin, who's pretty chalky, and it's also, I don't know, we'll get to Irving, but it kind of feels like flimsy chalk to a degree, because heading into last week, Mayfield had 24 passing touchdowns. The running backs just had 6 rushing touchdowns, and Mayfield himself this year has 3 rushing touchdowns. So also, I just love Mayfield, like the most dog in him player in football right now. And so he's just like fun to have money on and rooting interest. And so, yeah, shout out Baker.
Yeah, I'm taking notes over here on some players that I need to add to my write-up of the slate breakdown, because Baker's one that like seems pretty obvious to me, like a pretty obviously strong play. And you just made, you know, a great case for him. Leverage on the Bucky Irving stuff. Yeah, makes a ton of sense. All right, who else? So one more. Who do I think that you're going to be on?
Conviction play. Feel strongly about it. Want heavy exposure to. And then we'll talk fringe guys if you want.
All right. I feel like it's probably the opposite side of the game from what I want. So I wrote up Jalen Hurts. I'm guessing that your guy is Lamar Jackson.
No, it's Jalen Hurts to me.
Oh, hell yeah.
I mean,
okay, good.
I mean, they're both like really good plays at 2%, where the argument for Lamar, I think, again, the argument's easier, stronger for Jalen, but for Lamar, it's just like in this game, they both can get there. We know opposing quarterbacks are positively correlated. Lamar could just be the one who does more with his legs in games where they're really pushed. He needs to be Superman. Like he does it, and he gets those rushing touchdowns. He can also get 100 rushing yards. That's possible. But no, to me, it's Jalen Hurts who's actually been far more efficient than Lamar since week 6. So like the best ever season by fantasy points per dropback was Lamar's sophomore year, where he averaged like, I don't know, 0.82. Jalen Hurts since week 6 is averaging nearly 1.0 fantasy points per dropback, 1 fantasy point every time he drops back, which is crazy. The issue is Eagles rank dead last in pass attempts per game. But if Jalen was dropping back as often as Baltimore opponents do against them, he'd be averaging, based on this, 42.5 fantasy points per game. Yeah. And it's just the nuts matchup. Ravens giving up the most passing yards per game. They're also the league's biggest pass funnel by PROE allowed. And it just looks like this is the matchup, the spot, the key to unlocking this Eagles offense. They'll finally get pushed. And so it's not just Jalen Hurts. It's also AJ Brown, who's averaging the second most yards per route run in fantasy points data history. And so now he gets pushed as well. So the potential massive, highest over under of the week, highest implied point total of the slate. So, but yeah, to me, it's Jalen Hurts, who's 300 cheaper and in a much better spot on paper.
I should have just guessed Hurts, because that was my favorite play of the slate also. But I thought, well, I feel like I'm more, I fall for like macro matchups more so than you do, where you can just be like, yeah, but like Lamar Jackson averages 25 fantasy points per game. Like a lot of times it's just like you simplify things more than I do, where I'm just like, this is a great matchup, go for it. Yeah, we are very much on the same page. Jalen Hurts looks awesome. D-Bro on the same page also says Hurts, AJ Brown, Dallas Goedert log out. Will you be including Dallas Goedert, you think, in your Hurts stacks?
I don't know. It always makes sense to stack a tight end. So Hilo really likes Mark Andrews this week, and maybe a little Isaiah Likely due to Charlie Kolar's absence. To me, it's kind of just like I try and fit the tight end in the stack where I can get it, but it'll depend on the individual lineup. I was gonna say something else, but oh yeah, I'm rooting for Devonta Smith to play. Actually,
I think he's playing.
Okay, nice, to keep AJ Brown's ownership down.
Or maybe that was just he's like trending toward playing, I think is maybe the latest I saw. So yeah, interesting. Yeah, I think that's a good call out. Like it seems like a better matchup with or better spot with Devonta Smith out, but yeah, probably does bring down the ownership. All right, so we got to your favorites. let me just throw out CJ Stroud against Jacksonville. Like, he's been really bad this year, like one game over 20 fantasy points. But like, if you're ever going to put up a big game, it's against Jacksonville, right? So any interest in CJ Stroud?
He's just been so horrible this year. 15.4 DraftKings fantasy points per game, and he's 200 cheaper than Mayfield, who's averaging like 10 more than that. But yeah, I mean, like you said, it's a great spot. I think you can kind of just play Nico and be fine. It also could be a mix-in eruption spot. So that's kind of why I didn't write him up. But yeah, it is a good matchup for him.
Thoughts on going to Kirk Cousins on the other side of the chalky Justin Herbert?
Yeah, it's interesting because so Chargers secondary was like elite to start the year. They've really fallen off the last 5 weeks. They're also dealing with some key injuries. Darnell Mooney and Drake London both popping as top values. So that makes sense. The thing is, like, that hasn't worked outside of the Buccaneers, right? So I wouldn't go there.
Okay. I don't think that I have any other quarterbacks that I'm like, really feel the need to hear about. I don't think I'm going to Drake May at all. So unless you really wanted to sell me on somebody like Drake May or Trevor Lawrence, sounds like you don't. So I think we can move on.
I wrote up, Bryce Young early in the week, like some guys like that, just trying to like get a feel for the slate. And scroll down, and I did write up Russell Wilson, and then as like a super thin option, and then Ryan Heath talked me off of it. But it's just like a cheaper way to fit a Bengals onslaught. But I don't think that's necessary. Though the one quarterback I did write up, like who made it after publish, was Trevor Lawrence, which is like weird because like I'm the world's biggest Trevor Lawrence hater. Yeah. But it's a really good defense. I mean, a really good matchup, and Evan Ingram's popping as our top tight end value, BTJ a top 3 wide receiver value. Maybe even like a Devin Duvernay is in play in a perfect matchup. Probably not. But anyway, he's just cheap, and the stack pops as a top value. So he's vaguely in play. But to recap for you taking notes at home, conviction plays for me would be Burrow, Baker, Hurts, and Stafford.
Love it. All right. Let's move on. Let's move on to running backs. See if this works. Did not. All
that's relative to ownership. I mean, Richardson's in there too, but yeah, he's a little chalky.
All right. So I want to sort by ownership, then go to running backs. Highest owned running back is Chase Brown against the Steelers. Does the usage for Chase Brown outweigh the matchup with Pittsburgh? He's only 6,200, getting 34% ownership on DraftKings. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, he's far and away the best running back play of the slate. Like if he was 900 more, like he would still be the best running back play of the slate. Since Zach Moss went down, he's received every single backfield touch, played on 85% of the snaps, averaging 20.7 carries, 8 targets. Over this stretch, he's finished first, second, and first in XFP. It's just insane. It's like the Christian McCaffrey role. Like it's just, all in. Factor in ownership. There's ways to get creative. There's ways to get around it, but that whole argument centers entirely around ownership. Maybe the play is Burrow. Like I said, I don't know, but you could also stack him up with Burrow. He's just a sick play.
So you're not worried about the matchup at all. You say it really comes down to ownership. You're not concerned that much with the Steelers matchup.
I don't think matchups matter all that much when you're like an uber bell cow who's heavily involved in both phases of the game. And like, that's what we're seeing 21 carries, 8 targets. And so it's like, okay, Pittsburgh has a really good pass rush. Great. Chase Brown's getting dump offs that inflate his PPR ceiling. And that's an extension of the running game now. And it's all that. So no, not really. It's just 6,200 for LaDainian Tomlinson-esque usage is, and maybe that comes down after the bye. They get Herbert more involved, but I don't know. These are all must-win games for the Bengals. So, and there's a long way to fall from a 100% touch share.
All right, Debro wanted me to pull this up. Pitt versus zone rushing. How do I find that, Scott?
And go to advanced rushing defense.
Advanced rushing defense. Of course, I think we did this last week. All right. And then
You scroll to the right to zone.
this is taking a second. Let me refresh. Here we go. Advanced rushing defense.
Oh, we went free on the data suite this week. I think this is the last day. So if you want to finally see what all the hype is about and play around with it, you can go to data.fantasypoints.com. You don't need to make a login. You don't need to give an email. You can just play around with it. Wow, look at that.
Would you look at that? Second worst against zone. Interesting.
Wow, good
All
call,
right.
D-Bro. Interesting. So maybe it's not a bad matchup. All I know is far and away insane value. Great play.
Okay. Alvin Kamara, second highest owned running back on the slate, 27%. He is 7,700. How are we feeling about Kamara?
Yeah, I think you play him in cash. I think he's a really good cash play. But for tournaments, the argument's like, well, he's kind of more like a cash play, right? And questionable upside for a guy who hasn't really scored touchdowns in a while. Taysom Hill scoring a lot of touchdowns. He just feels safe to me, but he's not someone I fear fading at all. And I think I am going to fade him on a great deal of my lineups, gravitating instead to some of these higher priced wide receivers. Joe Mixon, I like more for tournaments as an example.
Yep. Makes sense. Would you include him in a Ram stack as a bring back?
That you could do. Yeah.
Okay. Although you could also play Taysom or MVS.
That's right.
As D-Bro says.
That's right. You could also do that.
One of the options. Yeah. So you got options there. Bijan Robinson, 22%. He's 7,300 against the Chargers. How we feel about Bijan?
Again, top 3 cash play. I feel a little bit better about his upside than Kamara for tournaments. I think, but he's hit 21.5 DraftKings fantasy points in 5 of his last 6 games, behind only Barkley in fantasy points per game over that stretch. Volume wasn't as good as his production, but I think he is more of a full-on bell cow now. Tyler Algier was stuffed on 3 consecutive goal line carries in week 10, and we've really seen him be more of an afterthought in recent weeks. Neutral matchup, but I like Bijan. I might like some of these similarly priced wide receivers more, but we'll get to that.
Okay. Bucky Irving, you already kind of alluded to your thoughts on Bucky Irving, but getting 19% ownership, 5,800, great matchup with the Panthers. How are we feeling about Bucky?
Yeah, by far. So player I was convicted in, I said heading into week 1 that this would be this year's Kyron Williams. Really like the player. He just had his best usage of the season by far, by target share, snap share, route share, XFP, fantasy points. It was all great. But I mean, it was still just a 45% share of the backfield XFP. He hasn't been over 55% in any game this season. And so to me, I think it's, people think they have more confidence in the situation than they do. I might be wrong, but it just seems like at that ownership percentage, especially relative to Rachaad White, there's a little overconfidence there. And I feel like that's exploitable. I mean, even if it is a committee and even if Irving isn't in the better end of that committee, he could still get there because it's the nuts matchup and he's cheap. But to me, I think I'm going to come in under the field. I think I might even sprinkle in some Rachaad White contrarian plays. And I mean, there's also a chance Sean Tucker, he was used at the goal line. Maybe he rears his ugly head again this week. But yeah, so not really scared of a Bucky Irving at 19%.
Yeah. I think I'm on the same page as you. Like, I think 19%, I'm not afraid of it, but I think I actually might not be that far from 19%. But I also think Rachaad White, that part of it is like really interesting to me for GPPs. If everybody's going to lean in on Bucky Irving playing the leverage play in Rachaad White, I think that is a great call out. He's cheaper, gets the same great matchup. Obviously not as efficient as Bucky Irving, but he's going to get that little ownership relative to Bucky. I'll be taking some shots.
I mean, it's not apples to apples, but like every time I click Bucky, I want to find the extra 700 to get to Aaron Jones at 8%.
Okay. Well, then let's skip down to Aaron Jones. So tell me about why do you love Aaron Jones at 6,500 against Arizona?
Well, he was fully back to bell cow status last week. And it's for tournaments, it's just an easy bet on that sticking. It's possible it doesn't. It's possible it's just a product of a surprise shootout. But I kind of think, yeah, I think he's back to being a bell cow. And the few weeks before that, he was really banged up. He was on the injury report. And so if he is a bell cow, he has no business being in the mid 6K range. You look at the games, he's cleared a 60% snap share, 20 XFP per game. That would rank second best on the slate. 19.2 fantasy points per game would rank top 5 on the slate, despite having the worst touchdown luck at the position this year. And that's what it is. This isn't an efficiency thing. It is a luck thing, worst touchdown luck at the position. And like I said, with Sam Darnold, is Arizona has been the best defense against quarterbacks since week 7. Maybe you can look at the quarterbacks they faced or whatever, but still, like, it wouldn't surprise me if this was a prime Aaron Jones game.
Yeah, I did not realize how much he got back to his usual role. 22 carries last week, also back up to a 58% route participation. Yeah, that is pretty strong and getting fairly low ownership, 8%.
Yeah. So that's another conviction play for me, but I'll have at least one more for you.
Okay. We do have a couple more like sort of chalky running backs that I want to touch on. Any interest in Kyren Williams at 7,200?
Not at 16% ownership. Famous last words. Maybe he buries my Stafford double stacks, but it's just the guy isn't being involved in the passing game anymore. And since Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua have come back, Rams have been like weirdly, atypically very pass heavy near the end zone. And that was really where the bulk of his fantasy production came from. Led the league in red zone XFP per game last year. And then until these guys return, that was the same thing. So 19%, or 16%, I'm okay getting away from that, but it is a great matchup, and maybe the Saints don't show up. So I get it. I just think there's better spots. Chuba Hubbard, maybe he's a cash play. I think according to our projections, he is. I don't even like him that much personally, but I think he's an uber bell cow now. He's coming off of his 2 highest snap shares of the season. I think that sticks. I don't think Jonathan Brooks is involved. I think they love him. I think this role is great. This is the Rashad White role from last year. I'm a Dave Canales truther, all of that. It's just 16% exposure for a guy who's like at least a little bit game script sensitive. They're 6-point dogs, and 3 of Hubbard's 4 games over 18.5 DK have all come in their only 3 wins this season. It is a great matchup on paper, but like the game script element doesn't really worry me too much about ceiling at 16%.
Do you think Jonathan Brooks is any concern for people playing Hubbard? Like, could he have a bigger role this week?
I mean, he could. It would really surprise me.
Okay. Kenneth Walker, 14% ownership at 7,000. How are we feeling about Kenneth Walker?
Yeah, I ended up not writing him up. I just didn't feel strongly about him. He just hasn't done anything for weeks. I think John Proctor has been calling him a Ponzi scheme for like 4 weeks now, but it also like feels fluky. Like it also feels like he's due. Like the usage is still good. It's still like a high powered offense, but again, ultimately didn't make my list before publish.
Okay. And you already said Joe Mixon is somebody that you're very interested in.
Yeah, very interested in Joe. You just look at what he's done this year, and it's right up there with Saquon Barkley, or well, a little bit behind, but still like second best behind Saquon Barkley, I should say. He's hit 100 rushing yards and scored a touchdown in 6 of 8 full games this year, across all 8 games, including the 2 games he flopped. Would rank first in XFP per game, second in fantasy points per game. And then those 2 games he flopped, those were bottom 6 matchups and games Houston lost. But that's not the case this week. For one thing, they're favored by 4 points. 2, it's a top 3 matchup, maybe the best possible matchup. And so massive slate wrecking potential. I'd rather have him than Alvin Kamara for tournaments personally.
Yeah, I think Mixon makes a ton of sense at 8,000. Gus Edwards, I'm really curious your thoughts on Gus Edwards at 4,300. Any interest there?
Yeah, I didn't write him up. I don't like, what's his rushing over under? Like, even if he gets 18 carries, it feels like 48, right? But maybe he scores 2 touchdowns and he's cheap. He also works his leverage off of a super chalky Justin Herbert, right?
True. Yeah.
But yeah, ultimately didn't make my list. He's averaging like 2 yards per carry.
I don't want to play him, but once I start making lineups, I think there's a part of me thinks like he might end up in my player pool because I want to play like Jalen Hurts with AJ Brown, and suddenly it's like if you want to play anybody else expensive, you got to find some value somewhere. So maybe I get down there for some of those more expensive stacks, but we'll see. Haven't decided yet. Are you going to any Saquon against Baltimore? He's 5% ownership, but he's 8,500. Tough matchup. What do you think?
I think you have to. I think.
Damn it. I don't want to though.
You have to. Like 5% is illegal. Like anytime you ever see one of these power law players come in under 10%, even like a Jamar Chase, a Saquon Barkley, you have to have 15%, no matter what. It's just, and like, look at what he's done. One of the best running back seasons ever. The dude has scored 36 plus DraftKings fantasy points in, wait for it, 50% of his games this year. You're only looking at a 50 percentile outcome for him to absolutely wreck the slate. So he's done that in 50% of his games. All other running backs combined have just 4 games this year. He's 4%, or what is it? 5%? Stupid. Not only that, he's also 8,500. Neil, Christian McCaffrey at the end of last season was 9,600.
Yeah, I don't want to though, Scott. What about that? What about the fact that I don't want to?
You don't want to, but no one else wants to.
I know,
which is where all the upside is.
Would you say the same for Derrick Henry? Is he a power law player that you need to have? Yeah.
I prefer Saquon. I think the argument's better for Saquon, but for Henry, it's. I mean, the matchup's a little bit better. He's a little bit cheaper. He's a little bit lower owned. Ravens are actually favored in this game, but to me, yeah, it's just, what if the Eagles don't show up, or just Baltimore wins this a little bit more easily than people think? He averages 27.4 DraftKings fantasy points per game in the 7 games that Baltimore has won by more than 1 point. And so it's like, okay, if they win by a touchdown, like, could easily be a slate record with posting a had to have it score.
Yeah. Breece Hall, 7% ownership.
No, didn't crack my list. He's also a little banged up, right? Or is he okay? Is he okay now?
I think he's okay, but yeah. Okay. So no real interest.
Just pales in comparison to some of the other guys in that range. But I mean, he could hit. I could see it. It just nothing really popped for him.
New contract, James Conner. Is he going to be playing, showing out for that money?
Could be. Just not on my list. The Trey Benson thing, because like, what if that's not? Then you're losing. I mean, Trey Benson has led the team in rushing yards back-to-back weeks, right?
Has he?
Something
really?
like that.
I didn't realize that. Would you consider Kamani Vidal? I mean, you don't want to go to Gus Edwards, but what about what if Kamani Vidal, like some of the coach picks seems like they want to give him some role. It's kind of unclear how much of a role, but he's 300 cheaper than Gus Edwards, going for 0 ownership. Is he worth the flyer?
I don't know. It feels a little thin to me.
Yeah.
I don't really chase those guys, but that seems. But I mean, I know you do, and you have success.
More like a Neo play, yeah. I don't know if I'll go I'm debating. He's one of those RB2s. Rashad White would be my RB2 of choice, because I'm not even convinced that he is an RB2, but he's getting the ownership like it. Yeah, probably not going to Vidal. You pulling up the Benson?
Yeah, I don't think he led in rushing, but it's been like a 60-40 split. Something like that.
Yeah, it's. I mean, we can look at the usage.
Right.
Over the past couple weeks. Only 8 snaps last week for Benson. Is that right?
Maybe it was the other running backs then.
4 carries. Yeah. So, I mean, Connor only had 7.
That's what it was.
Benson and DeMarcado had a total of 5 last week. DJ Dallas didn't have any. Yeah, I don't know. Kind of a meh play regardless. Let me see if there's any other names that I wanted to. None of these 0% guys, I don't think. Do you have any interest in like Najee Harris or Jalen Warren against Cincinnati?
Not really.
Okay. I wrote up Najee Harris. I didn't feel that it was just like I felt like I needed to write up somebody because they're playing Cincinnati. It's like it's a pretty good spot for the Steelers. So like if you believe in the offense at all, somebody should probably make the list. And I wrote up Najee, but didn't feel that great about it. Tony Pollard against the Commanders, kind of a run funnel, right?
Yeah, not going to play him with Tajay Spears back. Brian Robinson, if he plays, not the coach speak was really bad on that, and it seemed like he was going to be limited. It's going to be a committee. Justice Hill popped to me as a kneel play. Like I'm not going to play any of it, but on like a Hurts or Lamar team, seems like it's vaguely in play.
Yeah, no, that's a good call. It's not somebody that I had given any thought to, but that very much is a Neil play. Like if you play for like this is one of the few games where like Baltimore could get behind, and if they're playing from behind, it's a Justice Hill week. So I like that call as in game stacks in particular. I think he makes some sense. All right.
Someone asked about Ramondre and Jonathan Taylor. I thought long and hard about. If the Patriots were favored by 4, I would love Stevenson this week. If the Colts were favored by 5, I would really like Taylor, but I don't know, close spread. It kind of mess with my head. Not super into it, but it could get there. It could get there.
Gianna wants to know about Jeremy McNichols. Would you consider him? Like if you really think that Brian Robinson is limited, I assume if Brian Robinson was out, you would have interest in McNichols. But if Brian Robinson is in, maybe he's the 1% owned guy who maybe has a bigger role than we're anticipating. What do you think?
We were projecting Brian Robinson out, and he still wasn't really popping as a great value. I think he was like top 10 for us, but no, I left a note to myself to spend more time in it later tonight.
Okay. I mean, it's not a great matchup with Tennessee, but also cheap enough would have I would think a pretty good role. So I don't know, maybe worth thinking about. I'm not seeing any other running backs that I want. I think we've talked about everybody who's projected for 1% ownership or more. Do you have any other names you want to throw out there?
No, I don't think so.
Are you ready for your intermission?
Oh, I appreciate it. Yeah, I did the stupid thing I did again where I had the heat on, and so I'm dying. So yeah, just give me 3 minutes. Maybe show people how to get to the subscriptions page, build a lineup.
Sure. All right. We're taking an intermission for Scott. I'm going to continue on without him. He'll be back in 3 minutes, as he said. Yeah, if you want to get to the where you can sign up, just go to fantasypoints.com. Go to this plans page at the top. And there you have it. Pretty straightforward here. All in bundle, $40. NFL premium, $10. Use promo code OTB. I actually don't know if we still get if it works. Try promo code OTB. See if you can get a little bit of a discount there. Regardless, it's already discounted so much that you might not need it, but if you want to try it, give it a shot. I will try playing with lineups here. I'll go back to the projections page first. I'll play around with a lineup. All right, let's see. What do I want to build? I guess I'll build a Millie Maker. We always build Millie Maker teams on this show, so I guess I will do that. What can I build that Scott does not want? I feel like we're on mostly the same players here. I guess I'll do a CJ Stroud team because he's not on it, and I do have some interest there. I think I would play Nico Collins in every single CJ Stroud lineup that I make. I'm torn between Tank Dell and Dalton Schultz. I think I'm inclined to go to Dalton Schultz here. But I think both look like pretty strong plays. Schultz just 3,300. He's had a better target share since Stephon Diggs has been out. I see Scott is back already. Man, you were gone for like 30 seconds. What was that?
Oh, I put the AC up. I took my sweatshirt off. I got a soda. I stretched a little bit. I'm feeling good now.
All right.
People say I'm grumpy on this show, and I really just think it's like I'm not built for the marathon streams that you're used to.
Yeah.
And so I gas out and I get cranky.
Yeah. All right. Debro has insisted. So I'm gonna finish out this lineup, then we'll get on to wide receivers. Debro insists that I include Tank Dell. I talked to Pat Corain. He said he thought Tank Dell was the better double stack also. So I will concede to Debro and Corain and put Tank Dell in there. And then I'll use my bring back here of Evan Ingram.
You want to save this for the end of the show, and we'll revisit it?
Okay. I mean, as long as you're here, I guess that makes sense to not finish this until the end. All right. Let's move on to wide receivers. And I think I'm going to have to refresh here. So I'll just do that right now. I'm going to sort by ownership. David Moore, $3,500 David Moore. Man, I was not anticipating 25% projected ownership there. Thoughts on 25% ownership on David Moore?
Yeah, what are we doing here, folks? David Moore, like he has one double-digit fantasy point game since the Obama administration. He, prior to, going off last week, he was averaging 0.98 yards per route run, and now he's still at 1.18. Yeah, I get it. He's cheap. He scored 20 fantasy points. He ranked top 5 in XFP last week. It's a top 5 matchup. I cannot do that. I cannot on any planet do that. So what I will be doing is going extremely heavy on Adonai Mitchell, maybe even playing some Adam Thielen leverage play, sprinkle in a few Adam Thielen, but mostly just going way heavy on Adonai Mitchell and fading David Moore.
Yeah, 25% to me in a large field GPP is just like an auto fade there. So I think I will tail you on Adonai Mitchell. T. Higgins, 21% projected ownership. He is 6,600. He has had a better role than Jamar Chase in the games they've played together so far this year. Project for 20 fantasy points at 6,600. How are you feeling about T. Higgins?
Yeah, so I certainly get why he's projecting as our top point per dollar wide receiver. Everything you look at him, he just looks like a mid wide receiver 1 priced as, I don't know, a high end wide receiver 2 on the slate. He is seeing better volume than Chase, more consistent volume than Chase. In his last healthy games, his last 5 healthy games, cleared a 35% first read target share in all of them, would rank top 3 among all players in first read target share. By fantasy points per game, 20.8 would rank behind only Jamar Chase on the slate. And so, yeah, great play. If you're looking for an argument against him for tournaments, and so we think Joey Porter Jr. is going to shadow. Some people disagree. Mike Clay disagrees. Mike Clay thinks Joey Porter Jr. shadows Jamar Chase, but Porter typically shadows the X, like always shadows the X, and that's the role that T. Higgins plays. So we do think Higgins will be in the tougher matchup. It's also a perfect schematic matchup for Jamar Chase, who also offers insane slate breaking potential. And so one way to get around that is to play Chase. And I do really like Jamar Chase this week.
I mean, you already went to it. I was about to ask you about Jamar Chase. I think you just gave the analysis. Do you have anything else to add there?
This is, again, it's not a great matchup on paper, but it is, if you think it is much better, if you think JPJ is going to shadow Higgins, which we do. And then it's the best schematic matchup Chase will get all season. Like we always talk about, it's like Jamar Chase versus single high. That's when you get those game wrecking performances. The Bengals just don't see a lot of it. Like even teams that play single high at a top 5 rate, they face the Bengals, they get scared. That comes all the way down. Not their opponent this week, the Steelers. They're very stubborn with it. I think the lowest they've played it all year would be the highest the Bengals have faced it all year. So, yeah, really, really like Jamar Chase. I like AJ Brown more, but it's close, and I do like Jamar Chase.
Okay. We already talked about it with the quarterbacks, but Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, if you were going to play one as a one-off, do you have a preference, or are you just playing all of both of them?
Puka Nacua would be my preference, but it seems like that's everyone else's preference too. Yeah, you just look at, I mean, they're both smashing. Like I said, Puka 1, Kupp 2 among all players and targets per route run. In 6 of 6 full games, Kupp has hit 15 fantasy points. Nacua in 4 of 4 full games, 7 receptions, 95 receiving yards or more in all of them. And then like, even in those 4 games, the production's tight because Kupp is scoring the touchdowns. But no, my lean is Puka. I will say it's very close. Also maybe a little bit better matchup for Cup, but it's just like elite for both of them. So yeah, Stafford doubles, like I said at the top of the podcast.
Yeah. You already said Lad McConkey is not your favorite at 6,100, 18% ownership.
He's a must on FanDuel for DraftKings. I don't mind. He hasn't really flashed much of a ceiling this year. We keep waiting for the target volume to jump, and it's just not jumping. Like, I love this player. If you read my redraft stuff, I'm like, he's going to be a league winner for you in the playoffs. But for DFS, I think it's easier to get away from. So it's not a good schematic matchup for him. It's a reverse slot funnel. So Ryan made arguments for Disley and QJ and Palmer. If you wanted to get creative, I probably wouldn't do that, but unless it's like a super unorthodox Herbert build. But yeah, 18%. Don't really live in fear of that.
Okay, we have 3 players at 16% projected ownership. Drake London, Brian Thomas Jr., Calvin Ridley. Let's do those 3 real quick, and then we can move on to some other plays. Thoughts on those 3?
Yeah, Darnell Mooney is a much better play than Drake London. Significantly cheaper, but volume and production is really not too far off what we've seen from London when we look at their healthy games together. Matchup is actually really good. Chargers secondary is great to start off the year. They've really fallen off a cliff if you look at schedule adjusted last 5. Their top cornerback is also out this week. And it's a schematic matchup that really benefits, Mooney over London. So I feel good about that. For Brian Thomas Jr., the only counter argument would be a Derek Stingley shadow. If Stingley shadows, this is probably like a bottom 7 matchup. If not, it's like an easy top 3 matchup and he goes nuclear. But even with the Stingley shadow, I kind of still like, I still love Brian Thomas as a value. He was dealing with that injury for multiple weeks. But in his last game, he had like a 60% yardage share. So I think that signals he's back, or at least after this bye week is back to full health. And so prior to that injury, he ranks 6th among all wide receivers in fantasy points per route run. And now Christian Kirk is out. Now Gabe Davis is out. And now Trevor Lawrence is back. So he's clearly a cash play to me, one of the top 3 values at the wide receiver position. And then Calvin Ridley is right there behind him. Ridley has had back-to-back brutal schematic matchups. So he fell under 7 targets after hitting that number in like 5 straight games. Is also really tough matchup against Stingley's shadow coverage last week. But it's much better this week. If we gave him that 150-yard touchdown catch that was nullified by penalty, if we let that count, then he would have had 5+ catches and 70+ receiving yards in 5 straight games, averaging 100+ yards per game, 19.5 fantasy points per game, 8.8 targets per game. So, yeah, matchups maybe not great, but it is a great schematic matchup. Another guy who's definitely mispriced by like 800+. So I wrote him up as a cash play, wrote BTJ up as a cash play, Mooney as a fringe cash play. So I like all those guys.
Okay. Moving down a tier. I mean, I know you don't love CJ Stroud, but you like Nico Collins as a one-off.
Yeah. Really do like Nico Collins. So I just brought up Calvin Ridley. If that 57-yard touchdown catch counted, with Collins is the same thing. He had a 33-yard touchdown and a 77-yard touchdown called back over the last 2 weeks. If you let those plays count, he'd be averaging 124 yards per game. And then even that number needs to get adjusted upwards because he's had 2 games where he played under a 50% snap share. Basically, like what he's doing is like prime Julio Jones levels of insane. He also looks like that on film. His role was immediately back to where it was pre-injury. He gets his best matchup of the season. It's a great schematic matchup. like, how does he flop? It feels like the only way he flops is if Joe Mixon plus Texans D wrecks the slate. But even then, like, I could see them all hitting. So this is where it gets tricky because I love Nico. I love Jamar. And there's another wide receiver we haven't talked about who we'll get to.
Okay.
Oh, maybe two more. Maybe two more.
Let me break some news here, Scott. Both J.K. Dobbins and Austin Eckler just placed on IR, changing the landscape of the best ball playoffs pretty significantly over the next 4 weeks. I think they could be back for week 17, right? 13, 14, 15, 16. They'll be out. Theoretically, could come back for week 17. But big news in the best ball world, losing to one of them. Kind of he's been like world beater. J.K. Dobbins, Eckler been pretty good late round value also. So that's kind of interesting, but we'll continue on with it with the DFS breakdown. Mike Evans, I mean, he's 6,700. Carolina is the defense. I know my guy, I'm forgetting the name, but he was in here earlier talking about how to get to 1,000 yards on the season, he'll need like 140 yards. Not fooling around crew is who I'm referring to. Has been throwing out the stat to get to 1,000 yards. Evans needs 120 yards per game for the rest of the year.
Ooh.
Do you think that's going to inspire him and inspire Baker to throw him the ball? How are we feeling about Mike Evans?
I don't know. I love it. I think he can do it. I think he will do it. So last week it was a blowout. Evans only ran 4 routes in the second half, but he was at 3.78 yards per route run, 0.33 targets per route run. And basically, like if he had his typical routes run per game, he would have been at 10 targets, 110 yards. And so Baker Mayfield's balling out. And we saw what Cade Otton did without Evans and Godwin. And so, like, I think Evans steps into that, like, Cade Otton on steroids role. And, like, I think he's good. I think he's fully healthy. Again, yards per route run is great. I think he led all players in ass last week, and he leads on the full season. It is a great schematic matchup. It is a very good on paper matchup. And I think he's an awesome value, a great play, 6,700.
Yeah, really, really tough to argue that, even if you don't factor in the narrative of them wanting to get him to 1,000 yards, which honestly, that's one of those narratives, like, there could be something to that, especially against Carolina. Like, we could just put up 180 yards this game if we want to Mike Evans. So I could kind of see it. But yeah, great play regardless, just because the matchup is so good. We've talked about the Ascot a bit. I don't know if we need to say much more about it, but Adonai Mitchell, 3,900, 12% ownership. Do you want to say anything more about how much you love AD Mitchell?
Oh, I love him so much. Read Ryan Heath's advanced mat. This is like one of the most convincing best blurbs I've read. But yeah, Adonai Mitchell, the Ascot God, he's crushing in our metric average separation score, which you can access for free on the Fantasy Points data suite right now, or get a discount, $40 for the all-in package, Black Friday sale. But he's crushing in that. And when you crush in that, ideally it means you're going to start getting targets more because you're open a lot. What it definitely means is you have really high big play ability, touchdown potential, because you're getting so open, as is the case with Adonai Mitchell. No Josh Downs, no Ashton Doolin, Alec Pierce, very banged up. And yeah, crazy stat for you. So they're going to face a ton of man coverage. Mitchell leads all wide receivers in man ass, which is a hilarious stat. But not only that, he leads the team in catches against man coverage, which is insane because, like, the dude has a 20% route share. So yeah, much better play than David Moore at much lower ownership. You don't have to tell me, maybe this isn't good, but I'm all in on the Ascot. Doesn't seem like other sites are getting there either. They're playing David Moore. I would take the young, exciting Ascot rookie over the 31-year-old nobody 100 times out of 100. Yeah,
no, you've convinced me. I didn't even write up Adonai Mitchell, but I thought about it a lot. I was like, I feel like I'm missing something here because he projects so poorly that it was like, I feel like I should be like including him. And then he just projected so poorly, like across the board. But it looks like he's better projected here at Fantasy Points. And I'm into it.
And still not high enough. Yeah. I need to have a strong word with Chris Wecht.
Yeah. I know you love AJ Brown. Do you have anything more to say about your love for AJ Brown?
Yeah, this is why this slate is tricky to me because, I gave you those 5 quarterbacks. I typically like to narrow my pool to 3, and then our favorite weeks are the weeks where I'm just all in on Jameis and then he smashes.
Yep.
So I don't like that. And then it's kind of the same thing with the wide receivers where it's like, oh, Evans is awesome. Oh, I really love Nico, but I also could see Jamar Chase bearing us this week. And then there's AJ Brown. And so AJ Brown would be my favorite. Luckily also the lowest owned, which is so stupid. It doesn't make any sense. The dude has hit a 28.5% target share in each of his last 6 full games. No player has done that across the full season. He's done it in 6 straight. If you look at the 7 games, he's cleared just a 50% snap share. He's averaging 100 yards per game, 18.6 fantasy points per game, easy top 5 numbers. And then you factor in that the Eagles rank dead last in pass attempts per game. It becomes even more impressive. He's averaging 3.93 yards per route run, a 46% yardage market share, top 2 numbers in fantasy points data history. And so this looks like the spot where he's finally going to get pushed. The Eagles finally get pushed. So you have that insane per route number, and now the routes go way up. And then it's also a great matchup where Baltimore is giving up the most passing yards per game, the most schedule adjusted to outside wide receivers. It's also a good schematic matchup. It's also Devonta Smith banged up. And so, it's like I'm going back and forth on Nico. I'm going back and forth on Chase. And then it's like Chase averages 50 fantasy points per game against Baltimore. You take those 2 games out, he falls a pretty long distance. But who's against Baltimore this week? It's AJ Brown. So maybe he has that 50 fantasy point outing. Someone's asking, Scott, can you list your top 5 plays of the week? Yeah, read the article or hit me up in Discord. Otherwise, this is all you get.
Steven said, I bought it referring to the all-in package. Yeah, he says he bought the all-in package. He says, I paid more for the ability to read all of the weekly articles that are derived from the data suite. Yeah, I think that, it's an underrated part of the package at Fantasy Points is like, I love digging into the data suite, but also like, I don't necessarily know which stats are the stickiest. Whereas if you actually pay for the content that like Scott does, Scott has years and years of experience. He knows exactly like which data is sticky data, what is going to be like, what is predictive of what's going to happen going forward, which is why it's worth it to pay for it, in my opinion, to get access to Scott's articles, Ryan Heath's articles, a lot of great content behind the paywall at Fantasy Points. And of course, right now is the best time to buy it with the Black Friday discount. You said $40 for the rest of the year for the all-in. Insane deal. Highly recommend it for anybody who has not already bought it. Does the promo code still work? Do we know if the OTB25 promo code, while you were gone, I was like, I think maybe you can still use this. I don't know if it's going to work, but give it a try. If you sign up, try using promo code OTB25, see if you can get still 25% off the reduced price tag. And if you can't, it's a good enough price anyway. You doing any bring back for your Baltimore stacks? Do you like Zay Flowers at all?
Yeah, I really like Zay Flowers. So he's on a bit of a cold streak lately, but like the target volume's still really good. He's seen, at least 6 targets in each of his last 7 full games. But by target share, he's at 27.7%. That's top 4 at the position. And then he's just like an elite tournament play. And this is true every week. And he's always under owned relative to that. He's hit 21.5 DK fantasy points in 5 of 11 full games. He was under 12 in the other 6. So like volatile. I mean, you could look at the matchup. Matchup's actually not terrible with Darius Slay out. Schematic wise, it's like a little good. But it's one of those cases where it's like 2 juggernaut offenses in a shootout. Matchups don't really matter. So really love Zay Flowers upside. I think that's an easy mini stack. AJ Brown, Zay Flowers. You could do that all day. So I do like him.
I know you much prefer the Ask God. Nobody loves Michael Pittman. And I guess he's getting 10% ownership. So not actually that contrarian, but he's 5,200 with no Josh Downs. Any interest in Michael Pittman?
No, I'm all in on the Ask God. He also gets Christian Gonzalez. So that's a little bit of a tougher matchup. And so there was something fluky about his production last week. I don't remember what it was. but outside of that, hasn't really done anything all year, dealing with that back injury.
Yeah. George Pickens is 6,800. Kind of nice matchup with Cincinnati. Any interest in George Pickens?
Yeah. Most unlucky player in fantasy this year. Has had a ton of touchdowns overturned on review. He has the most fantasy points lost due to penalty. But even so, he ranks 6th among all wide receivers in yards per route run. So it's like the same thing with AJ Brown, where it's Steelers probably finally get pushed here. And so freakishly efficient on a per route basis, those routes come way up. And you've seen since Russell Wilson took over, he's low end wide receiver 1 volume, low end wide receiver 1 production, despite that bad luck. And it's an elite matchup. You look at the schedule adjusted for Cincinnati last 5 weeks. They're the most vulnerable defense to wide receivers. And so, yeah, it's just a really good, we haven't seen the Pickens eruption spot, and this is a really good spot for it.
Yeah, definitely could be that spot. I know Debro called out the name Calvin Austin earlier, coming in at 2% ownership at 3,300. Any interest in Calvin Austin?
No. Debro, why do you always do this to me?
Debro, you gotta stop doing this. No, the Devon Vele call, 80% route participation for Calvin Austin last week, 6 targets. I think that's I like it better than the Devon Vele call last week, which looked like awesome in the first half, by the way.
That was a good call. I actually got around in that. So
Okay.
when Debro put a tweet out, so I don't know.
Right.
You'll have to sell me on Twitter.
Yeah. All right. So Debro, there's your mission. You got to sell Scott on Calvin Austin on Twitter. I'm already kind of sold. 80% route participation, 3,300 no ownership in a good matchup. Good enough for me. Good enough. We doing either of the Jets receivers, Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson?
No. You could play Garrett Wilson, I guess, on a Geno team, something like that.
I guess I would say Devontae Adams, 7,000 on FanDuel looks like a really strong play, more so than DraftKings, so that's worth calling out. Tank Dell, any interest there?
Didn't make my list, but I mean, it's the nuts matchup. he's still crushing ass. A lot of people are going to play Nico, but yeah, I'm not going to do that. I just don't think he's quite right relative to last year. So upside isn't as high.
Yeah. You mentioned Geno as a quarterback play. Which wide receivers do you like from Seattle?
Yeah, it has to be JSN, and it's a little confusing. He's drawing only 5%. He's averaging 28.2 DraftKings fantasy points per game over his last 3 games. I talked about earlier why I think, this isn't as bad of a matchup as it looks. I still don't think it's good for the wide receivers. But I don't think it's as bad as it looks. Maybe JSN is just finally who we wanted him to be. Like, coming out of college, my model in my article, I said, he's Keenan Allen reincarnated. And then 5 weeks ago, I should have been shot for saying that, but 28 DraftKings fantasy points per game the last 3 weeks. So really shocking to me. He's only 5% in the everything report. I kind of nitpicked it, poked some holes in it, said why it feels a little unsustainable. The usage isn't as good as this production implies. But still, I mean, should probably be a little bit higher than 5%. Yep.
I feel like I had another name to throw at you, and I've lost it now. Oh, do you have any interest in Devonta Smith at 1%? I know you're more in on AJ Brown, but
man, I mean that's a good I like the way you're thinking, but I'm personally not going to go there. I would be devastated if Devonta Smith ruins my. But I mean, the guy hasn't had a 90-yard game all season. It's really been AJ Brown, the alpha. Highest yardage market share of any wide receiver in fantasy points data history. So I personally won't, but I like the way you're thinking. That's a smart outside the box call.
Marquez Valdez-Scantling, 4,500. Has the role been better there? I don't. So tough, dude.
How much money has Rashid Shaheed made us? And this guy is now Rashid Shaheed light. The only thing he does well is the one thing Derek Carr is like elite at, which is the deep ball. Last two weeks or 2 games, 23 DraftKings fantasy points per game on only 3.5 targets per game. That's not at all sustainable, but 4,500 for Rashid Shaheed Light is a fair price. Rams are a premier outside funnel. It's a top 5 matchup. It's an elite schematic matchup. Rams play single high at a top 5 rate. MVS averages like 2.3x boost to his fantasy point per route run against single high. So it makes sense. Like I said, I don't like Kamara. And so I like MVS. I like Taysom. Touchdown equity, like how do they typically score? It's typically like deep shot, explosive plays. And then, I don't know, maybe Taysom Hill at the goal line. So, 3% owned. I think he's strong.
Yeah. And the biggest thing holding me back from wanting to play any MVS prior weeks was the route participation, but that's gone up enough that it's up to 77% last week. So that has been ascending pretty consistently. The past 3 weeks been ascending each of them. So I guess can't really argue with it as playable. Anybody that I have not named that you are feeling you to talk about? Justin Jefferson, I guess, 10% ownership.
Yeah, I'm like worried. Like I said, it's AJ Brown, Nico, Chase. Oh, and then Mike Evans is somewhere in there too. But I really like all those guys. I guess he's a little bit cheaper. And so I'm probably not going to have any Jefferson. So if Jefferson buries me, I'm going to be so pissed. It's really not the right matchup for him. It's nothing about his profile really stands out. He's had one double-digit target game this season. He has a season high of just 26.3 DraftKings fantasy points. Like last year, he hit those numbers in every fully healthy game but one. And so it's just different this year. That said, he's the best wide receiver in football. And, if there is a squeaky wheel narrative in play, like he could for sure go nuclear. But I'm not making that calculated bet. I'm making it on AJ Brown, et cetera. And I'm just hoping he doesn't bury me, but I'm not too worried about it.
Okay. Yeah. I'm debating. I'll probably play some Justin Jefferson because I am a Vikings fan and I can't help myself, but I really thought he'd come in much lower ownership. 10% is like, doesn't strike me as like an awesome play. Anybody else? Marvin Harrison Jr.?
No.
Anybody on the Chargers other than Lad McConkey? Sorry.
Again, Ryan Heath made arguments for some of the other guys due to the schematic matchup on paper matchup. Josh Palmer ranked top 5 in XFP last week. Like, it was kind of like the David Moore thing where it came out of nowhere. Just he wasn't productive with it. QJ did have good volume. He just dropped everything thrown his way, but Herbert, was encouraging. I'm probably not going to get there, but I did think deeply about it.
With Xavier Hutchinson, I think he's out this week. John Mechie, maybe the role is a little bit more secured as a wide receiver 3. Any interest at 4,100 against Jacksonville?
Probably not.
Okay. I think I might consider playing him just a little bit with Xavier Hutchinson. Like that's just enough for me to be like, great matchup. He's 4,100. I don't know. Maybe I'll take a couple of shots there.
Yeah. What's the matchup look like? I know he went off against Detroit, but Detroit's the worst defense against slot wide receivers.
Oh, in terms of slot receivers, over the past 5. Oh, so Jacksonville slot is the best. Interesting.
Yeah. So Jake didn't co-write this week's article for me, and so I knew I was going to be allowed to write up any super off the wall galaxy brain play I could think of, and the one I wrote up was.
Wait, what was
because of this? Devin Duvernay.
Oh, Duvernay. Okay.
Do you
know? Is it on my end? Scott is like I'm not hearing Scott right now.
Testing.
Oh no, I hear you saying I saw you like moving in super fast motion. Okay, PW Soccer says there was a lag there, so it was not just on my end, or
Okay.
maybe it was on my end, but regardless, there was some lag. So sorry. Tell me about Devin Duvernay. I missed what you said.
So yeah, go back to last 5 and click on slot.
Yeah.
Texans premier slot funnel. Especially now with Jalen Petrie, their slot corner potentially out for the year. And Parker Washington, per coach speak, is going to play the Gabe Davis role. We don't know that it's Duvernay, but just based on coach speak, it really seems like that is Duvernay, who's 3K in the perfect matchup. But the argument against him is the dude has a career high of just 54 receiving yards. So I ultimately deleted him from the article. I just knew what Jake would say, and the ghost of Jake haunted me. So removed from my pool, but that was the one Galbrain, Derek Brown-esque Galbrain I had this week.
Yeah. Derek's mad that you are playing Duvernay and not Kelvin Austin. He does not approve.
Yeah, we're butting heads over shitty slot wide receivers who do nothing this week.
Who's going to score 7 versus 9 fantasy points this week? Chris Oster says, just an update from Schefter, since we are all in on AD Mitchell. Pierce is playing. I think we were assuming that, though. Yeah.
Good. Yeah. Keep him in the slot.
Yeah. Any other wide receivers to throw out there?
I mentioned Thielen as like a leverage play off of David Moore. I mean, first 11 weeks of the season last year, he was top 10 in fantasy points per game. So I'm a little worried. Like it seemed like he's still not over this injury. He had like a 66% snap share last week, and then was limited almost all week in practice. But YOLO upside still there. Probably a better play than David Moore.
Yeah. Mohammed says Ingram might play out of the slot a lot. That would only benefit Ingram.
Yep. That's part of the thesis on Ingram.
Yeah.
Projecting as our top value tight end.
Well, let's move on. Let's move on to tight ends then, and we can talk about Evan Ingram. And I think I'll just refresh. Well, let's see if this works. Just try. Oh, it worked. Look at that. Bug fixed. We have. Do we want to finish the thought on Ingram before we talk about Taysom?
Yeah. So Evan Ingram, here's a crazy stat for you, is he has either led or tied for the team lead in target share in 7 of 7 games this year. And then in 5 games without Christian Kirk last year, he's putting up mid-range wide receiver 1 numbers on mid-range wide receiver 1 volume. And so tremendous upside relative to that 4,800 price tag. Texans have been really good against inline tight ends, mediocre against split tight ends, and horrible against slot wide receivers. So I do think this is a good matchup for Ingram, playing sort of like the slot role, hybrid role. And so I wrote him up as the cash tight end of the week over Taysom personally. I just think he's quite a bit safer. He also projects as a better value, but I also really like Taysom.
Let's talk about that. I mean, Taysom, the role has been pretty damn good with Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed out. Over like 21, 22 fantasy points per game over the past 3 weeks, just been kind of insane. Tell me about your Taysom interest.
Yeah, so he played on a season high 55% of the team snaps last week. That was up from 40%. He ranks top 5 among all players at all positions in fantasy points per snap. And Clint Kubiak this week said, we are ready for Taysom to play every snap of the game, which if that happened, like if you take his fantasy point per snap average and you multiply it by whatever, that equates to like 35 fantasy points per game. So tremendous upside. You look at the production, dude just had like a 47 fantasy point game, would have had 23 the week before that, if not for a penalty, a touchdown called back due to penalty. He's like hard to talk about because he just like breaks my brain because his usage is so weird, but it's just like undeniably good relative to this price at this fairly gross position where like, you know, the premium pay up guy is one who has 0 receiving touchdowns this year. Taysom has much better touchdown upside and better than Ingram as well.
Yeah. I mean, we're not really expecting him to play every game though, right? That was like,
every snap. No way.
yeah.
No
I mean,
way.
that was in response to somebody asking like, "Oh, are you concerned about the workload due to his injury history?" And I think it was like he was exaggerating because of the way it was brought up. Like, no, he could play every snap.
Well, there were a few different quotes like that throughout the week,
Okay.
which kind of signaled that. So like he was at 55% last week. So what would my projection be this week? It would be like 55 to 68, something like that.
Yeah, that's fair. Debro says play Taysom or Ingram at tight end and log out. Do you agree with that, or are there any other tight ends you want to talk about?
Yeah, more than a few. TJ Hawkinson's right there. I really like Hawkinson. I mean,
yeah.
No Josh Oliver last week. No Josh Oliver this week. Route share jumped from 51% to 76%. Caught 7 and 9 for 114. So he's cleared a 22.5% target share, 70 plus receiving yards in 2 of his last 3 games. His last one was like his only one as a full-time receiver. Smash last year. He looks fully healthy. And so, yeah, 4,400. What was TJ Hawkinson priced at the tail end of last year before that injury?
Yeah. 5,800 probably, 62. Yeah, somewhere around there. Yeah, just a phenomenal role. And it's been awesome. 2 of the 3 games already since he's been back have been 7 and 8 and 9 targets in 2 of those 3 games since he's been back. We've seen the route participation, as you said, jumped up to 76%. I'm with you. I think he looks pretty strong here. Are you buying into Will Dissly at all? I know Heath was convincing you about him. Did he convince you?
He's just so weird to me. I don't really. He was also hurt earlier in the week. Should be fine now. Has the schematic matchup. Like the target share stuff is really good, but he's like a high-end tight end 3 by route share typically. But it was a season high, and he only has 2 double-digit fantasy point games this year. But I don't know. Dude annoys me. I can never get him right. I wrote him up and I ranked him in the piece, but he's not someone I feel really strongly about having exposure to.
Okay. Kate Otten, do you think there's anything to like, I know Mike Evans is back, but do you think he could retain, like could get back some of the role he had with Evans out when he had 38 targets in 4 weeks without Evans?
Yeah. The thesis is compelling to me when he's 1K cheaper than he was last week.
Right.
And so it's like, sure, Evans is now the alpha, but like Otten can still be a competent 2. So right. I like that. Oh, also he sucked ass last week, but it was a game that was over at halftime. It was also a worst possible matchup. I don't know why this is the case, but Giants' best defense against tight ends this year by schedule adjusted. Panthers, meanwhile, the absolute worst. So yeah, I do think he's a little underrated. Yeah. I haven't heard anyone else talk about him positively this week, by the way. So 12% might be high.
Yeah, I think that probably is high. Trey McBride, if he can ever just score a receiving touchdown, wheels up, 11% ownership. How do you feel about it?
There's like 2 ways to approach it. One is, okay, what if he has a 50 percentile outcome, but he actually scores a touchdown? Oh, that's right. Great. Yeah. And then the counter argument is like, you don't play tight ends and GPPs when you're 12 weeks into the season and he has 0 receiving touchdowns. I kind of align more with the latter, especially because there were so many wide receivers I like. So he ultimately didn't make my pool, but my write up, but I could see it. He's okay.
Okay. Hunter Henry, 4,200 on DraftKings. He's only 5,100 on FanDuel, so he looks better there. But how do we feel about Hunter Henry?
Yeah, it's a top 3 matchup. He's clearly the number 1 by volume. He's had at least 8 targets in 4 of Drake May's last 5 healthy games. Easily highest target share on the team over that span. Still, I mean, like hasn't done much, but top 3 matchup. He's fine.
Anybody? I mean, Dallas Goedert sounds like you had some interest in maybe throwing him on some stacks. Would you play him as a one-off at all?
Probably not as a one-off, but yeah, okay. not with Devonta Smith back.
Okay. Yeah, I suppose that cuts into his role a bit.
Ertz is solid, by the way. He leads the team in target share since week 7. He's their number 1 receiver by target volume. Tennessee is also a little bit of a tight end funnel, and it is a good schematic for him. He's fine at 3,800.
So it's not Ben Sinnott week yet. Damn it. Keep
Right.
waiting for Ben Sinnott week to happen. Mark, I mean, you talked about Mark Andrews a little bit earlier.
Yeah, that was Hilo's call. He didn't crack my list.
I think he's a fine play. Like just because he has those random 2 touchdown weeks, and this could be one of them. Dalton Schultz, I have some interest in Dalton Schultz at 3,300 without Stephon Diggs. Just I think the target share has been a little bit better without Diggs. Actually, let me double check that. But do you have any interest in Dalton Schultz?
Yeah, I was torn between him and Tommy Tremble, who's 500 cheaper. I ended up going with Tremble, but I don't really feel great about either one.
I guess down to 6% last week for Dalton Schultz. So it had been a little bit better without Stephon Diggs, but
yeah,
kind of regressed last week. Any other tight ends that you want to talk about?
No.
Okay, we can move on and make some lineups. Unless do you
yeah.
have any notes on defenses, kickers, or should we just finish making lineups?
No.
Okay. Well, let's finish out my lineup first. I don't know if this is what I was going to do. I was going to do this one without you so that I could do another one while you were there. But I'll finish this one up.
Okay.
I'll finish this one out. So I have 5,000 left per player. I have CJ Stroud, Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Evan Ingram, 5,000 left per player. So I need a little bit of salary discount. I'm going to buy into the ass man, Adonai Mitchell, to save some salary. Defense. Let's see. I think I'll go cheap at defense. Kind of interested in the Titans. I think they might be a pretty strong. Man, the Jets is interesting to me. Like that seems like a pretty solid bet at 2,500. I know they haven't been as good recently, but cheap enough. Yeah, I'm gonna go that route. Jets defense. Cheap running back. I mean, I could play Bucky in this one because I've already gone pretty contrarian in enough spots. All right, let's see here. Or I could go Rachaad White. I'll try Bucky. Chase Brown. Oh, then I could go T. Higgins if I want to. Yeah. I think I'll do that. There you go. CJ Stroud stacked up with Nico Collins and Tank Dell. Bring back of Evan Ingram. We've got Bucky Irving, one off. Chase Brown and T. Higgins. Mini stack there for the Bengals. Adonai Mitchell, one off. Jets defense. Book it. There you go. There's a lineup that could work. All right. Scott, do you want to do your lineup?
Yeah.
All right. Where do you want to start?
AJ Brown.
Oh, we're not starting with a stack. We're just going straight to AJ Brown. Okay.
Nico.
Look at this guy.
Chase.
Jamar Chase?
Yeah.
You know about the salary cap, right? This is DraftKings.
Give me an AR 15 plus 80 Mitchell stack.
Okay.
Give me the cheapest defense possible.
Would you prefer the Panthers or the Jaguars?
Jaguars are like honestly a good defense. Stroud has kind of sucked this year and takes sacks like crazy. So
the Jaguars are kind of a good defense, you said? Is that?
No, I'm saying like a good defense to play. They're the worst defense in football, but Stroud has just been eating sacks like crazy.
You're probably going to need to go cheap at tight end. So
Tommy Tremble.
All right. Now you have 53.50 left at running back per player. So this is where it's like you could go Rachaad White and Jeremy McNichols, or else you got to go with a cheap running back. Justice Hill, I guess, is there. We'll bring back on your
give me
Nico
Chase
Collins.
Brown. And then we'll just see what fits.
4,500.
Gus Edwards.
Oh. Gus Bus. There you go.
Young
do you want to upgrade defense or anything? You play the Titans, Cardinals, Jets, Patriots.
What
Probably
do
not
our-
Patriots.
What do our projections say?
Um,
Can we get the
let's see. So top
Panthers?
projected would be Jets.
Oh, we could afford them?
Yeah, you can
All
afford
right,
the Jets.
play the Jets. Let's do it.
There you go. Anthony Richardson paired up with Adonai
Give
Mitchell.
me a lineup review on this.
All right. Well, first, let me reread it. So we've got Anthony Richardson paired up with AD Mitchell. We have no bring back on this one from the Patriots. We've got one-offs of Chase Brown, Gus Edwards, AJ Brown, Nico Collins, Jamar Chase. We got one-off Tommy Tremble, and then the Jets defense. So I think the only correlation that I see immediately is Anthony Richardson with Adonai Mitchell for a milli maker. Like, I think that's
What about the
fine.
uniqueness of having 3 high-priced wide
Yeah.
receivers? Like
No,
one has more than 2, and very few will have more than 1. So it's just like,
Yeah.
is
That's
that
probably true.
overkill? Like, should I pivot off of Chase to Mike Evans, who I really like, or what?
I mean, the thing is that there's no part of this lineup that I'm like, that's a horrible play. Like, I think this looks like a strong GPP lineup, because you're right. Like that trio is going to be like completely unowned in GPPs. Everybody else, I mean, you got your favorite running back, I think, on the slate, Chase Brown. You didn't really want to. You're not excited about playing Gus Edwards, so that's the one spot that's like, you had to make a concession there. But getting a little bit uncomfortable in GPP is not the worst thing. You got your guy AD Mitchell. Maybe you don't love Tommy Tremble, but he
If
seems like a
AJ
fine play.
Brown scores 45 and one of Nico and Chase hits 30, like I'm not going to care if Gus Edwards does nothing, and he,
Right.
40 yards and a touchdown, like I'd be pleased with.
Right. Probably outscores everybody under 4,300 or at least anybody that's played under 4,300 in that case. So no, I think this looks like a very, very plausible large field GPP lineup. I think it looks good. Let's book it.
All right, we doing a collab lineup now?
Yeah, we're doing a collab lineup now. All right, let's see. Do we want to go Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Zay.
All right. Now we are hurting for salary. Do we just throw the ascot in there again?
Hell yeah. It's one of my biggest conviction calls of the slate. If this hits, I'll have to paywall the next one. So this is your time to join Fantasy Points. $10.
Yeah. Now is the time. Let's throw a cheap defense in there.
Those are all decent cheap defenses, honestly.
I know it's not the worst set of cheap defenses here. Titans,
Baker
this one
throws
maybe.
picks.
What were we saying? Do you have a
Baker
preference?
throws picks.
Yeah, Carolina's is so bad though. I don't know.
I know they really are the 2 worst defenses by far. But
I assume L'Jarius Sneed is still out.
Yeah, he's out.
Sam Darnold throws picks. I don't totally hate the Cardinals defense at 2,400.
But he hasn't since Hawkinson came back, right?
Okay, I mean that's pretty small. That's 3 games though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to do, I'm fine with it. I never have strong leans on defense. I do my Sunday morning show with Johnny, and he tells me who to play, and then I tail. Yeah. Dude, Darnold threw 3 picks against the Jaguars 3 weeks ago, and then 2 against the Colts. So,
and the Cardinals are better than the Jaguars. All right. So now tight end, we could go Taysom here or Ingram. I think we have the salary for it.
Or Hawk, yeah.
Or Hawk. Hawk is a little bit cheaper, but then we want to get rid of the Cardinals defense if we do that, which we could. We could try to correlate our defense with one of our running backs potentially. Let's try throwing in Ingram. Then we're going to want a cheap flex, I think.
Let's do Chase and Aaron Jones.
Okay.
And see what we can do, and then play around with it from there.
So we can put a $4,000 flex. Let's see. Oh, you know what we could do is we could pay down for David Moore.
Ugh. Let's move to Ertz or something.
Yeah, that's probably a good call.
How much is likely? I don't think I can do that, but
Likely 3,700. Ertz 3,800.
yeah. I don't know.
We put Ertz in there, we'd have 5,000 left. Is there anybody that we prefer? Like, do we want to pay even cheaper than Ertz, like 3,500, get up to Rashad White maybe?
This one's a little tricky. I'm looking back over a lineup.
And we could fit
Andrews is 3,900.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Try.
In this lineup as is, we could fit Taysom in here, or we could put Taysom in at tight end and then play whoever's best at 3,800, which maybe would be Ertz. I don't know if I love that pairing, but
I do kind of like that.
All right, let's try with Taysom at tight end.
MVS is in play, 4,500.
If we want to keep Ertz there.
Thielen 4,800.
Okay.
DeMarcus Robinson 4K. You're making me sweat my Stafford doubles after you said that. How many multiple touchdown games does he have?
I think 2. I think he had
back to back. That's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, unfortunately, David Moore is like the best projected now. But we could go likely Ertz.
All right, fuck it. We're unique enough. This will be my only exposure to David Moore this week.
All right, fine. We'll do one David Moore share. Then we can move up potentially from the Cardinals to. Do we have the Vikings or the Bengals defense fit here? No, we won't correlate with our running backs then. Do we like anything? I don't even see any defense that I love to pay up for here. Could just go to the Jets. Could go Patriots against Chalky Anthony Richardson. I don't know. I'm not seeing anything that I totally love. We go Falcons against Chalky Justin Herbert, but I don't totally love that either.
Yeah.
Do we just do
Jets? Screw it.
Jets. All right. We'll do Jets. There we go. 200 left over. We've got Jalen Hurts single stacked with AJ Brown. Bring back of Zay Flowers, Aaron Jones, Chase Brown, AD Mitchell, Taysom Hill, David Moore. Jets defense leaves 200 on the table. I think that works. I think that works as a Millie Maker lineup. Just debating if we wanted to go like we could have gone Dallas Goedert here, and I don't know. Let's just we can do this. This works. All right, there you go. We made our 3 lineups. That's gonna do it for this one. Armin says the Derek Brown is here. Fantasy points royalty. Yeah, always good to have Derek Brown in the chat. Sneed on IR. Arizona Sneed on IR. Derek says.
Legarius.
Oh, Legarius. Okay, got that. He was responding to me a while ago. All right, Scott, this was fun. I know that you have at least one more show tomorrow morning, or I assume you do. If you're able to wake up for it with Johnny Proctor in the morning. Anything else this weekend?
That's it. Just I'll see you in Discord.
All right, find Scott in Discord. I'll be putting up my Sunday Night Football article on Fantasy Points tomorrow. I'll be on my own channel, the Flannelverse, doing a breakdown of the Sunday Night Football game 85 minutes prior to lock for that one. So go check me out on the Flannelverse if you want to join me for that. But yeah, other than that is going to do it for this show. Make sure you sign up for Fantasy Points. Try the promo code OTB25. See if it works. Otherwise, it's already discounted quite a bit. Thank you, Scott. Thank you all for hanging out with us. We'll be back next Saturday for Outside the Box Week 14. See you then.
What?
Why are you shaking your head? You're welcome.